where it branches from the heart. So we'll start right here. This major vein, it's connecting to the right atria. So what is that?
It's the superior vena cava.
Yes, superior vena cava. And then we can see that has two forks, right? They're just little forks before it branches again. But each of these small parts have a name. So we have a right and a left what?
Brachiocephalic?
Yeah, brachiocephalic. So you have a right brachiocephalic vein and a left brachiocephalic vein. And that name is telling you where the next two branches are going. Brachio refers to the arm, cephalic refers to the head. So if we follow that, we can see here we have a branch going into the arm and a branch going up into the neck towards the head. Okay? So these two branches off of the brachiocephalic vein, the one going into the arm, what do you think it's called?
This is subclavian?
Subclavian.
Yeah.
Right, so this one, in this case, is telling you what it's doing. It's underneath the clavicle going towards the arm. Okay, so sub, below, clavian refers to clavicle. So you have the right subclavian, and then again this is a mirror image, so you have the left subclavian. Okay. And then you have this big branch that's going up into the neck.
That's the jugular, right?
Yeah,
jugular
so
vein.
This is the right jugular vein, and then you have the left jugular vein. Okay, so mirror image is pretty easy. But again, always remember to put whether it's the right or the left.
Where are they at, the jugulars?
These guys right here that go up into the neck. So they're like a little bit wider. The carotid arteries sort of go right along the trachea, whereas the jugular veins are more to the outside. Yeah. Okay. Then here we have that lower branch coming out of the right atria.
Inferior vena cava.
Inferior vena cava. Okay, and then we have that one weird unpaired vein that we're learning in the venous system. So it's on the right side. It branches off of the superior vena cava. See it right there? And it runs down. So that's the what? It means not paired.
Azygous.
Azygous.
Yeah.
A means not or un, and zygous means pair. So the unpaired vein is right here.
And that's running to connect with the superior vena cava?
Yeah, so it runs all the way down and it sort of drains back into that inferior. It's branching off of the superior vena cava, right? And then it comes down and it's sort of going to be connecting with that inferior vena cava down here.
Did y'all
It's
color the
essentially-
veins blue? Or are they
They're
really
injected
liquid?
with dye.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah. So that's why some of them aren't as dark, and usually the arteries, they're supposed to be bright red, but a lot of times, for some reason, the dye doesn't move as well. Okay, so we had the azygous, then we can come back. Remember, in the liver, we have the hepatic veins, which are all these branches that are allowing us to filter the blood, because the liver's purpose is to filter toxins from our bloodstream. Okay, so it's going to take that deoxygenated blood, branches from the inferior vena cava here and the hepatic portal vein into all the hepatic veins. The blood gets filtered and then it comes back into that inferior vena cava where it goes into the heart. Okay, so you can't see those hepatic veins, but know that they're referring to the liver. Okay, and then so there's all this tissue kind of where that inferior vena cava comes back together, and we can see it if we move all the intestines out of the way. So there it is right here.
What is it?
The inferior vena cava reforms after the liver. And then you can see there's a branch going to the kidneys on either side. So this branch is on the left side, so it's the what?
Left renal vein.
Left renal. So renal refers to the kidney. So left renal vein, and then we also have a right renal vein. You can see it right there.
Okay.
And then we can follow the vena cava all the way down, right? The inferior vena cava to where it branches, okay, or ends. So we have a right branch and a left branch, and we're right over the hip bone. So what do you think this is? Iliac.
So if you put that on the practical, we're not gonna have to because they're so close to each other. We just put iliac vein.
Yeah, I'm not
that'll
going to
be fine.
make you differentiate between external or internal.
Okay.
And the same thing will go for the arteries.
Okay.
Even though on most of these you can see the difference between those, I'm not going to have you differentiate.
Even though it says it on here.
Yeah, you can just, for that one, you can just write
Iliac.
iliac. Okay?
Okay.
So here's that right iliac vein, and then you can see the left iliac vein right there. And then we have the end of this abdominal body cavity. So where it exits the abdominal body cavity, it gets a new name.
femoral.
Yeah, so right here. So this is the left femoral. The right femoral didn't take the dye, so it's hard to see, but it's actually this part right here. But it looks the same as the artery, kind of, because it didn't take the dye.
Right.
All right, so that's the veins. So now we can go back and do the arteries.
Right.
So the same thing, we're going to start with the major artery, which is the aorta, right, connecting to the left ventricle.
So these right now are colored, but are practical. They be blue or red, and
Yeah.
if it's vein or
Yeah.
At least you'll know it's a vein
Yeah,
or an artery.
you'll know if
if
it's a
like the
vein or an
color.
artery based on the color, for the most part, right? And like I wouldn't pin on this one because it didn't take. I wouldn't pin the right femoral vein because it didn't take. I would pin the left one if I wanted to see the femoral. But just because they're colored red and blue doesn't mean you don't have to write whether it's an artery or a vein. I'll take off the point if you don't write the name that it's an artery or a vein. Okay. So here we have the heart, and we have this big branch here that comes out of that left ventricle, okay? And we can see that aorta. Remember, it travels all the way through the body. So here it is. There's that aortic arch, comes down through the thoracic cavity, enters into the abdominal cavity, and then branches. Okay? So there's our aorta. And you can see there are two major branches coming off the aorta. So remember, the vena cava it had these two branches, but they are sort of parallel. These are kind of separate branches. We have the bigger branch on the right side and the smaller branch on the left side. That small branch on the left side, if we follow it, goes all the way up and over here into the arm. So what do you think that's called?
Subclavian.
So that's the left subclavian. Okay. Then this big branch on the right side off the aorta is called what, do you think?
Brachiocephalic.
Brachiocephalic. So when we talk about the arteries, there's only one brachiocephalic artery, whereas when we're talking about the veins, there are two brachiocephalic veins. Okay, we can follow the brachiocephalic artery up, and here we can see it branches into three branches. Okay, two go up into the neck, and one goes over into the arm. So the leftmost branch we can see here, okay, coming up into the neck. So what do you think that's called?
The common carotid.
Yes, and this is specifically the left.
Right.
Okay. Then this middle branch, okay, we can see comes up here on the right side of the neck. So that's the
right common carotid.
right common carotid. And then the rightmost branch off of the brachiocephalic artery here goes over into the arm.
Left subclavian or right.
Right subclavian artery. So keep that in mind. The right subclavian branches off of the brachiocephalic artery, whereas left subclavian branches directly from the aorta.
Okay.
All right, so then that's pretty much the hardest part, I think. Then you can follow this down. When you look in here, you can see all those tiny little branches coming off the aorta that go in between the ribs. So what do you think those are called?
Intercostals.
Intercostal arteries, right? So there's a bunch of them. Each rib essentially has one, and they follow the ribs sort of all the way along when they're giving oxygen to that intercostal muscle, okay? And then this, we can see that division between the thoracic cavity and the abdominal cavity, right? You can see the remnants of the diaphragm here. And we have the aorta goes all the way down, but we can see there's this branch here that goes to the stomach. So what do you think the branch to the stomach is called? Celiac artery.
Yeah.
Okay. One celiac artery. Okay, or celiac trunk.
Trunk, yeah.
Either one, because what happens is when it's called the trunk, it just means there are a lot of branches coming off of it usually. So when you think about the pulmonary trunk is going to the lungs, but it has several branches that are actually connecting to the lung tissue. Okay, and then we have this lower branch coming off the aorta, and you can see it's going to the intestines, and the intestines mesenteries. Remember, the connective tissue is called the mesenteries. So what's this called?
Mesenteric.
So the mesenteric artery, right? And again, with this, I'm not having you differentiate between superior and inferior. So if you just put mesenteric artery, that's fine.
That's basically what's going to the abdominal cavity.
Yeah. And there are two of them because they're going all to the intestines. So there's sort of a lot of tissue to be supplying blood to. Okay. Then we have the same thing. We have branches here that come off the aorta and go to the kidneys. So this is the left
Renal artery.
renal artery, and then we have the same thing on the right side if we can find it.
You want to
Sort of
start
under
left and
there.
right?
Yeah, so this is the right renal artery. Okay. And then the same thing, we follow the aorta all the way down till it branches over the hip bones. So these have the same name, so the right iliac artery and the left. And again, you can see the internal versus external, but I'm not going to test you on that, just right iliac. Okay, then we exit the body cavity, and we can see where it runs along the femur. So this is the right femoral artery, and then you can see the left femoral artery. Okay.
Cool.
The only one we didn't go over was the coronary artery, but remember those are the functional blood supply to the heart.
And so
you
we're
can
not
see
doing-
on here, right? They're actually supplying oxygen to the heart. So you can kind of see them on here where the dye has taken, but I'm more likely to ask you the coronary arteries on the model. Okay.
You're not going to ask us about the tibial arteries either,
No,
right?
no.